Welcome to Vigilante Justice Chronicles. This is the Fireside Briefing. Truth by the Firelight. With your hosts, the Keeper and the Watcher, where we bring forward the saga of Vigilante Justice.
Imagine asking some massive institution, like maybe a government agency or a giant corporation, for a single, highly specific piece of paper.
Right, because you have the right to see it.
Exactly. The law says they actually have to give it to you. And as a supposed favor, they comply by, backing up a dump truck and just dropping 10,000 unorganized, heavily redacted pages right onto your front lawn.
Which is just a nightmare scenario.
It really is. And today, we are looking at a collection of sources that calls this deliberate avalanche a FOIA storm. And we're heading into a deeply unsettling, almost Southern Gothic landscape to figure out how to actually survive it.
Yeah, it is a phenomenal way to reframe the modern problem of information overload. We're taking a deep dive into a series of video transcripts from a YouTube channel called Vigilante Justice. But the tone of this material is likely going to catch you entirely off guard.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you hear the name Vigilante Justice and instantly picture like high-speed chases or kicking down doors or some aggressive internet crusader, you really need to wipe the slate clean. We are exploring a remarkably poetic, spooky series of theirs called Needle in a Haystack. And it serves as the quiet, haunting aftermath to their previous series, which was titled FOIA Storm, referencing, of course, the Freedom of Information Act.
Right, and what makes this source material so compelling is that it doesn't read like a dry lecture on public records requests. It paints this thick, humid picture. It asks you to step into a fog-drenched landscape where Spanish moss hangs from swamp trees, and the air is just heavy with humidity.
Yeah, you can almost feel it.
But then when you look closely at the branches, you realize that isn't moss, it's paper. Thousands of damp, graying pages of official records just fluttering in the wind, sinking into the mud, and slowly dissolving.
It creates this visceral feeling of standing in the wreckage right after a huge disaster. And that scene is exactly where the narrative drops us. The storm has passed over a place the sources call Corruptionville.
Such a great name.
Right. The sky is finally clear, but the paperwork has stayed behind. The text describes records piled like snow, with the truth caught in fences, cannons, and trees. So what is the fundamental mechanism at play here? Because on the surface, releasing all those documents looks like compliance. It looks like transparency.
Well, that is the brilliant sleight of hand the author is really exposing here. We tend to view transparency as a purely positive, binary thing. Either they give you the documents or they don't. But a FOIA storm introduces the concept of weaponized transparency.
Weaponized transparency.
Yeah, the mechanism relies on our human cognitive limits. If an entity knows they cannot legally destroy a damning document, their next best defense is just to bury it. They flood the zone with so much irrelevant data, so much noise, that finding the core truth becomes basically statistically impossible for a single person. As the source material notes with this great bit of dark humor, this ain't weather.
This ain't weather. Meaning it's a manufactured crisis, it's totally intentional. I mean, if you've ever tried to dispute a 500-page medical bill or read the terms of service for a new app, you've experienced a micro version of this.
Oh, for sure. Every single day.
The sheer volume of information is designed to make you just give up.
Yeah.
It's like a magician trying to hide a missing ace of spades. They don't just palm the card, they throw the rest of the deck directly into a hurricane. And they just leave you to figure out what's missing while 51 other cards are flying at your face at 100 miles an hour.
That's a perfect way to describe it. And amidst all that chaos, the source includes a detail that elevates this from a simple metaphor to something, well, much more profound. They mention a ghost. Specifically, the ghost arguing they've seen this before.
That line really stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah, it introduces a really heavy sense of cyclical history. The powerful using bureaucracy and noise to drown out accountability is not some new invention of the digital age.
Yeah.
It's an old trick. That ghost represents the collective memory of everyday people who recognize the tactic. It's the sheer exhaustion of knowing that obfuscation has always been the shield of the powerful.
But, knowing it's a trick doesn't automatically solve the problem.
Yeah.
If you are standing in that swamp, literally up to your knees in mud and thousands of decaying pages, your instinct is probably to start frantically digging.
Yeah.
You want to fight back.
Naturally.
But the source narrative actively discourages that kind of reaction. Instead of giving us this aggressive action plan, it takes us into a deeply atmospheric flashback.
It transports us to a time before the storm, introducing a figure referred to as the Voodoo Queen. The transcript describes her as just a child in the fields, existing in a world of foundational quiet.
I love that phrase, foundational quiet.
The imagery is just gorgeous grass taller than the truth, silence thicker than lies. It is the exact antidote to the chaotic, weaponized noise we were just talking about.
And in that quiet space, her mother imparts a lesson. She says, power isn't found by force. It's found by knowing where to look. She tells the child, the needle was never lost. It was waiting. And I have to be honest, when I first read this, I felt a wave of skepticism. In a world where institutions have endless resources to hide things, doesn't passive waiting just look like surrender? I mean, how does sitting still actually help you find anything?
It sounds super counterintuitive until you consider the physics of the metaphor they are actually using. Think about a literal needle in a literal haystack during a hurricane.
Yep.
The hay is incredibly light. It catches the wind. It's designed to be blown around, just like the distracting news cycles, the irrelevant controversies, and the useless paperwork. But the needle is heavy. It's solid metal. The wind doesn't affect it.
Oh, wow. So the panic is the trap.
Precisely. If you chase the flying hay, you become part of the storm. You exhaust your own resources fighting distractions. So the lesson of the Voodoo Queen isn't about giving up. It's about tactical patience.
Tactical patience.
Yeah, you let the chaos expend its own energy. You stand your ground. Because eventually the wind has to die down, the hay blows away, and the heavy, immutable facts are left sitting right there in the mud. The truth wasn't lost. It was simply covered up by a temporary system of noise.
I see the logic there.
Yeah.
You basically starve the storm of the reaction it was designed to provoke.
Oh.
But let's ground this in reality for a second.
Okay.
The wind dies down. You've successfully waited it out. You are looking at the mud, and you find fragments of the truth scattered around. How do you actually put it together? Because the powers that be aren't going to accidentally drop a pristine document with the truth stamped in red ink. They are going to leave you with totally disjointed pieces.
Exactly. And this brings us to the dark art of bureaucratic evasion, which the sources explore through a specific antagonist. They introduce a character named Officer Piggy.
Right, and just to clarify for everyone listening, we're looking at Officer Piggy strictly as the literary framing the author uses. It's a symbolic stand-in, an archetype for institutional stonewalling.
Yes, absolutely.
The text describes this entity as just trying to lay in the mold, hiding in the decay of the swamp.
And what makes this archetype so chilling is how mundane their logic is. The transcript spells out their exact mindset. Out of order means it does not count. Stamp dates are flexible. Context is optional.
That is the ultimate administrative nightmare. It's the logic of every labyrinthine phone tree or Kafka-esque compliance department you've ever had the misfortune of dealing with.
Oh, without a doubt.
But why is that specific tactic, scrambling the order of things, so effective at protecting bad actors?
Because accountability fundamentally requires a narrative of cause and effect. It requires causality. If A happens, then B is the result, and C is the person responsible.
Right, it's a chain.
Exactly. But if you can take a pair of scissors to the connections between those records, you destroy the causality. A, B, and C suddenly look like completely random, totally unrelated events.
It's severing the chain of custody. Imagine someone commits a crime, and the only evidence is a single, clear photograph. Instead of burning the photo, they run it through a paper shredder, mix the pieces up, and mail them to 1,000 different addresses.
That's a great analogy.
The physical matter of the image still exists in the world. They didn't technically destroy the record, but it completely destroyed the meaning of the record because the context is just gone.
Which is exactly why the source introduces a powerful countermeasure to this evasion. They call it stitching. The narrator reminds this evasive bureaucratic character and the audience that records remember things. The information doesn't cease to exist just because an institution scrambled the pages.
Yeah, the text says, the threads of fate are woven through every record. Look deeper and you will see the pattern there. I am so fascinated by how this elevates a very dry, tedious task.
Right, because in the real world, stitching means cross-referencing timestamps or matching the CC line on an email to an expense report.
Or finding the gap in a sequence of serial numbers. It's forensic accounting. But the author frames it almost mythologically. You are acting as a weaver of fate.
And pay close attention to how they describe the nature of that work. The narrator explicitly tells the officer, binding is not force, it is order. This is a super crucial distinction.
How so?
When you stitch records back together, you are not manufacturing a narrative. You aren't framing anyone. You are simply restoring the natural state of things before the storm hit. The pattern of truth was there the entire time.
But once you start restoring that order, once you start stitching the metadata and the timestamps back together, this terrifying bigger picture emerges. You realize that the gaps in the scattered records weren't just a happy accident for the people trying to avoid scrutiny.
No, not at
It
all.
reveals the true nature of the storm itself.
We arrive at the chilling realization that the environment is entirely engineered. The source drops this incredibly heavy line. It says, "Some storms don't arrive on accident. They are released when the ground remembers and the watchers come back."
I want to dig into that concept, particularly this specific phrase the narrator uses. They say, "The needle never moved, but the haystack did."
Yeah, that's a brilliant line.
If we pull that out of the Southern Gothic poetry and apply it to how we consume news or process public records, what does that actually look like?
Well, it looks like the intentional shifting of public attention. The needle represents an objective reality. Something happened. Money was moved. A decision was made. An event occurred.
The actual facts.
Right. The powers that be cannot invent a time machine to change the objective reality of the past. The needle is stationary. So what is their alternative? They move the haystack. They generate new controversies, release a flood of distracting data, or spark a really loud public debate, and they move all of that noise around the stationary truth.
They keep the hiding place constantly in motion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You think you are struggling to find the truth because it's deeply hidden, but in reality, you're struggling because the liars are constantly shifting the terrain around it.
That reframes how you look at almost every major news cycle.
Yeah.
You have to start asking yourself, am I looking at a real event, or am I just watching someone move the haystack?
It really does. It's a very paranoid feeling.
It is, but the source material doesn't leave us in that state of paranoia. It says that when this intentional storm opens its mouth, some things don't run away. They run right towards it.
Which forces us to finally ask, who are the people running toward a manufactured hurricane of data?
This leads us directly to the identity of the narrator themselves. Who or what is the Vigilante Justice Project? In one of their intermission videos, they basically break the fourth wall and deliver their actual mission statement.
Yeah.
And despite the comic book aggression of their name, they explicitly tell the audience, we are harmless.
It's a brilliant subversion of the listener's expectations.
Totally. They describe themselves as witnesses, a mechanism for slowing things down when the world is intentionally moving too fast. They say they exist to stand where the people stand, document what's real, and let the facts speak for themselves.
If you place that mission statement back into the spooky atmospheric world they've built, it creates an unforgettable image. They describe standing in places where the fog doesn't lift, where memory stays longer than answers.
Wow.
They aren't action heroes. They are quiet archivists standing their ground in a haunted swamp.
And they make a distinction that I think is the beating heart of this entire deep dive. They state, vigilante justice isn't a verdict, it's a watch.
Think about how radical that is in our current culture. We live in an era where everyone is expected to have an immediate hot take, a rapid-fire judgment, a verdict.
Right, immediately.
But they are saying, no, we aren't here to play judge or executioner. We are here to bear witness. We stand where the records thin out, where institutions try to replace explanation with silence.
Yeah.
We document what they release. We document what they deliberately withhold. And most importantly, we document the heavy truths that refuse to blow away.
They do it in their own words, not to accuse, but to remember. Because we the people deserve truth and respect. It takes the deeply unglamorous, often exhausting work of public accountability and gives it the mythological weight it actually deserves.
It really does. It elevates the act of reading public records into an act of profound, enduring resistance.
So let's take a step back and look at the terrain we've covered today. We started in the humid, chaotic aftermath of a FOIA storm in Corruptionville, learning how institutions use weaponized transparency to ground the truth in a deluge of noise.
Right.
We travel back to the quiet fields to learn the ultimate lesson in tactical patience from the Voodoo Queen, understanding that the heavy needle of truth doesn't blow away and that chasing the hay only feeds the storm.
We dissected the mundane but dangerous logic of bureaucratic evasion, recognizing how disconnected records destroy causality. And we explored the countermeasure, the quiet, methodical act of stitching the metadata and history back together, restoring order without ever using force.
And finally, we uncovered the true nature of the Watchers. The archivists who see the haystack moving and consciously choose to run toward the storm, simply to stand in the fog and remember. Now, the creators of this series know exactly how to hook an audience because they end the needle in a haystack narrative with a major cliffhanger.
They certainly do.
After noting that the bravest things run right toward the mouth of the storm, the narrator delivers a teaser for what comes next. They say, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is when pigs fly.
Oh, it's so good.
It directly sets up their upcoming series, appropriately titled When Pigs Fly. It promises that now that the records are stitched together, the Watchers are moving into a whole new phase of their journey. I cannot wait to see how they evolve this Southern Gothic universe.
It will be fascinating to see how the mechanics of accountability adapt to whatever comes next.
But as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. We spent this entire time talking about the human element, human bureaucrats moving the haystack and human watchers sitting patiently in the mud to find the needle.
Right, but consider the world we are entering right now with generative AI.
Oh, man.
If an institution or a bad actor no longer has to manually gather thousands of pages of distracting noise, but can instead use an algorithm to generate an infinite synthetic haystack in a matter of seconds, the dynamics completely change.
Yeah, that is terrifying to think about.
If the storms of the future are endless, automated, and multiplying at light speed, will human patience and careful stitching still be enough to find the needle? Or will the Watchers need to build an entirely new kind of magic to survive the fog?